You'd think that a woman who wears a badge would at least have the decency to follow the law of marriage. But nope. Turns out, just because she enforces rules on the streets doesn't mean she sticks to them at home. I used to believe in loyalty, in brotherhood, in discipline, in the unspoken bond between those of us who wear the uniform. That was before I learned the hard way that betrayal can come from both the criminals we arrest and the ones we share our lives with. My name's Mark, sergeant in the police force. Been serving for over a decade, the kind of guy who never backs down from a fight, who's dragged gang members out of alleyways, walked into domestic disputes where fists were still swinging, and kept my city streets clean from the mess that preys on the weak. And through all of it, I had one rock, one so-called partner in life who was supposed to have my back, Emma, my wife. A fellow officer. My ride or die. Or at least, that's what I thought. See, when you're in law enforcement, you trust your gut. It's what keeps you alive. And for a while, mine have been screaming at me. The late-night shifts that didn't add up. The way she suddenly got too tired to talk after work, her phone glued to her hand whenever I was in the room. The sudden, unexplained interest in hitting the gym when she'd never cared about fitness before. I knew something was off, but I didn't have proof. And in our line of work, proof is everything. That proof came to me in the worst possible way. It was just another shift. Another long night dealing with the usual chaos. Drunks fighting outside a club. A couple of punks trying to run from a traffic stop. Business as usual. I was supposed to head home after, but one of the rookies at the station mentioned that Emma was out late at an unofficial debrief with some of the guys. Something about that didn't sit right with me. We have official debriefs. Everything else? That's just an excuse for off-duty drinks. And Emma never mentioned it. So I drove past the usual bar where cops go to unwind, just to see for myself. That's when I saw it. Not inside the bar. No. My wife wasn't sitting with the others, wasn't laughing with the team like she always did. No, she was outside. In the dark alley beside the bar, against the brick wall, locked in a tight embrace with someone I recognized immediately. Detective Ryan Carter. My junior. A guy I personally helped train. Her hands were in his hair, his were all over her, and they weren't just standing close. They were wrapped up in each other like a couple of teenagers sneaking around. I could have lost it. I could have stormed in, made a scene, given them both a reason to regret it right then and there. But here's the thing about me. I don't react. I calculate. And in that moment, as the rage surged through me, I didn't let it take over. Instead, I smiled. Because they had no idea that they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. I didn't walk up to them. I didn't call her out. No. I did what any good cop would do. I gathered evidence. I parked down the street, pulled out my phone, and hit record. A nice, clear video of my wife, my lawfully wedded wife, throwing herself at another man, their lips locked, their hands all over each other like neither of them had a care in the world. And then I took pictures. Plenty of them. Enough to make sure there was no way she could talk her way out of this. But I wasn't done. See, some guys find out they're being cheated on and they crumble. They let anger cloud their judgment. Not me. I've been in the force too long to let emotions dictate my next move. Emma thought she could get away with this because we were both cops, because no one in the department would dare throw her under the bus. That's where she was wrong. Because while she was out breaking vows and sneaking around like a reckless rookie, I was already laying the groundwork for something much, much worse than a confrontation. This wasn't going to end with a simple divorce. No, I was going to make sure she lost everything. Her career, her badge, her future. And the best part? She wouldn't even see it coming. I used to think physics. My life wasn't a fairy tale, but it was solid, reliable. The kind of life a man could build a future on. I woke up every morning next to a woman who wore the same uniform as me, who understood the stress, the danger, the weight of the job. I thought that made us different, stronger. Most cops struggle to make their relationships work because the job takes too much out of them, but not us. We had a system, a balance. At least, that's what I told myself. Our mornings were always the same, early alarms, quick showers, a kiss before heading out the door. Some days, we worked different shifts, barely catching more than a glimpse of each other as we came and went. Other days, we'd share a quiet breakfast, drinking coffee in our small kitchen while she tied her hair back into that tight bun she always wore on duty. I used to love those mornings. The way she'd smirk at me over her cup, the way her eyes still had that fire in them, the same fire I fell for years ago. Our schedules were unpredictable, but we made it work. When one of us got home late, the other would leave dinner in the fridge. When I pulled overtime, she'd text me little jokes, telling me not to let the rookies get me in trouble. And when we did get a rare day off together, we made the most of it, grilling in the backyard, grabbing drinks at our favorite dive bar, or just lying around watching bad TV. Nothing extravagant, just normal, stable. Looking back, I can see the cracks. Little things I ignored. Like the way she started checking her phone more often, always angling the screen away from me. Or the way she suddenly got so into fitness. Emma was never a gym rat, not until about 6 months ago, when she decided she needed to start training more. Said it was for her endurance on the job. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? We had always pushed each other to be better officers, better partners. I remember the first time she forgot our usual Friday night plans. We were supposed to grab dinner, just like we always did when our shifts lined up. But that night, she texted me last minute, saying she was stuck with paperwork. Said she'd be home late. I didn't think much of it then. Being a cop means sometimes you get buried under reports and there's no getting around it. Then it happened again. And again. At first, I brushed it off. We were both busy, both dealing with the weight of the job. But then, she stopped leaving her phone out when we were home. Started locking it, keeping it face down on the counter. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off. Just apartment stuff. You know how it is, she'd say, rolling her eyes like I was being ridiculous. And I believed her. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You trust them. Even when the signs are there. Even when something deep in your gut is telling you that something's off, you push it aside. You tell yourself you're just overthinking. That the stress is making you paranoid. That's what I did. Until the night I saw it with my own eyes. Funny, isn't it? How life you thought was rock solid can crumble in an instant. How one moment can turn everything you thought you knew into a punchline. The worst part? It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the fact that, all along, I had been blind. And now that I could see, there was no going back. Cops rely on instinct. It's what keeps us alive. A sixth sense, a gut feeling, a whisper in the back of your mind telling you something's off before you even know what it is. It's what makes the difference between walking away from a call and ending up in a tough spot. And yet, somehow, when it came to my own wife, I ignored it. Until it became too loud to drown out. It started small. A shift in the way she spoke to me. Emma had always been direct. No nonsense. No games. We were both cops, after all. We didn't have time for drama. But lately, there was something different in her voice, like she was holding back. Not much, just a hesitation here and there. A pause before answering simple questions. Hey, how was work? I'd ask, the same way I always did. Fine. Same old. No details. No usual rant about annoying rookies or the paperwork piling up on our desk. Just short, clipped answers, like she was trying to avoid saying too much. Then there was her phone. We'd never had secrets. We both knew the dangers of the job. When you spend every day dealing with troublemakers and lowlifes, you don't bring that paranoia home with you. Her phone had always been just another object on the kitchen counter, buzzing with notifications she barely glanced at. But now she kept it close. Always in her hand or face down on the table. And locked. Always locked. The first time I noticed, I didn't say anything. The second time, I did. Since when do you care so much about your phone? I asked casually, watching her reaction. She barely looked up from the screen. What? Oh, just department stuff. You know how it is. Except I didn't know how it was. And there was nothing urgent happening in our precinct that night. A few days later, another red flag. I got off my shift early, one of those rare nights where things were quiet, no major calls, no paperwork keeping me tied up at the station. I thought I'd surprise Emma, grab some takeout from her favorite place, maybe have a normal night for once. But when I pulled into the driveway, her car wasn't there. That wasn't the strange part. We had unpredictable hours, and sometimes we got stuck working late. No, what stuck with me was her excuse when she finally got home. Late shift, she said, tossing her bag onto the couch. Paperwork nightmare. Yeah, I leaned against the counter, watching her carefully. Funny, I was at the station earlier. Didn't see you. Her fingers twitched, just for a second, barely noticeable. But I caught it. Oh, I was in the back office. Had to take care of some reports from last week. You probably just missed me. A perfect answer. Clean. Logical. And a lie. Because I had checked. Not just casually, not just in passing, I had walked through every darn office before I left, and she wasn't there. I didn't push it. Not yet. Confrontation without proof is just an argument waiting to be flipped back on you. Instead, I filed it away, adding it to the growing list of things that didn't sit right. Then, one night, the final warning sign. The one I couldn't ignore. We were sitting on the couch, watching some crime show she used to love but suddenly didn't seem interested in. I wasn't really paying attention either, too focused on the way she kept checking her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen like she was debating something. Then, she stood up. "I'm gonna grab a shower," she said, stretching like it was nothing. But I saw it, the way she carried her phone with her, clutching it a little too tightly. Emma never took her phone into the bathroom. I waited until I heard the water running, then moved. Quiet, controlled. Years of training, years of knowing how to move without making a sound. Her bag was on the chair, her work phone half sticking out. That one, I didn't care about. But her personal phone? The one she never left unattended anymore? That was in her jacket pocket. I picked it up. Locked, as expected. But the screen was still on, the last notification hovering for just a second before it faded. "See you soon. Can't wait." No name. Just a number. I put the phone back exactly how I found it, walked back to the couch, and waited. When she came out, towel wrapped around her, phone in hand, she glanced at me. "Everything okay?" she asked. I smiled. Small. Controlled. "Yeah," I said. "Everything's fine." And in that moment, I made my decision. I wasn't going to ask. I wasn't going to beg for the truth. I was going to find it myself. And when I did, there wouldn't be a single doubt left about what was coming next. The moment I saw that message, everything changed. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a cop on a case. The suspect? My own wife. The crime? Betrayal. I wasn't about to confront her without evidence. Confrontation without proof was just an invitation to be lied to, manipulated. No, I needed facts. Hard, undeniable facts. And lucky for me, I had spent my entire career gathering evidence, reading people, and knowing exactly where to look when someone was hiding something. The first thing I did was play dumb. That was the most important part. Emma couldn't know that I was on to her. If she sensed even a hint of suspicion, she'd start covering her tracks, getting careful. But she was already sloppy, too comfortable, too sure of herself. She thought she was untouchable. That would be her downfall. I started small. I paid attention. When she said she was working late, I made mental notes. Which shifts? Which nights? When did the excuses start repeating themselves? It didn't take long to see the pattern. Tuesdays and Fridays. Always those nights. Paperwork. Overtime. Late-night debriefs. And yet, I checked the station logs. No overtime recorded under her name. No reports filed past the usual hours. That alone was enough to tell me she was lying, but I needed more. Then came the passwords. Emma and I never kept anything from each other. At least, we never used to. But lately, her phone, her laptop, even her police database login, everything was locked down. Changed. She never said why, but she didn't have to. A woman doesn't suddenly start protecting her digital life unless she has something to hide. One night, while she was in the shower, I checked her laptop. Locked? Not surprising. But her work laptop? That was still open, left on the table. And work laptops had history logs. I pulled up the most recent searches, normal police records, cases she'd worked on. But then, one stuck out. A private security firm. More specifically, a background check request. For Detective Ryan Carter. The same Ryan Carter I saw her pressed up against outside the bar. That told me two things. One, whatever was going on between them wasn't just casual, she was looking into him. Why? Was she checking his financials? His past? Trying to see if he was safe to be with? Or was it something else? A cop only runs checks on someone when they have a reason. And two, she had no idea I was ahead of her. I played along. Kept up the same routine. Kissed her before work. Asked about her shifts. Pretended I still believed the lies she fed me. But behind the scenes, I set traps. I started following her. Not every night. That would be too obvious. Just the key nights, the Tuesdays, the Fridays, the late shifts. And every time, without fail, she wasn't where she said she'd be. No station. No reports. Just quiet parking lots, unmarked buildings, and Ryan Carter's car parked right beside hers. I took pictures. Videos. Dated. Timestamped. Irrefutable. Then I checked the finances. Joint accounts? Barely touched. But her personal account? Money withdrawals at odd hours, expensive dinners at places she never mentioned, hotel bookings under a different name. She thought she was careful. She thought I was blind. She had no idea I was just getting started. The truth wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was staring me right in the face, undeniable and cruel. I had all the signs, all the inconsistencies, but I needed that one final piece. The kind that doesn't leave room for doubt. And I got it in the worst way possible. It was a Friday, one of her usual late shifts. By this point, I already knew she wasn't anywhere near the station, but I needed proof beyond grainy parking lot photos and unusual spending habits. I needed something definitive, something that would leave no room for explanations or manipulation. So I did what any trained officer would do. I planned a sting operation. Her location sharing had been turned off for months, but that didn't matter. I had something better. Our patrol cars had GPS trackers, standard protocol. And since she often took hers home after work, I had access to its real-time location. Just a quick login into the department's internal system, and I saw it. Not at the station, not at some crime scene, but at a small boutique hotel on the other side of town. I could have called, could have sent a message, let her know I was on to her. But that wasn't my style. I don't ask questions I already know the answers to. I go straight to the source. When I arrived, her car was in the parking lot, right next to his. Carter, the guy I had trained, mentored, trusted. My junior. My wife's secret partner. I didn't hesitate. I walked in like I belonged there, like I was just another man heading to his room. No hesitation, no second guessing. The receptionist barely looked at me when I passed. These places don't ask questions, not when cash is involved. I found the room easily. 214. The door was locked, of course. But I didn't need a key. I had my own way in. A firm knock, a pause, then another. At first, nothing. Then, a shuffle. A hesitant voice. Who is it? Ryan's voice. I smiled. Cold. Controlled. Room service, I said. Silence. Then, the lock turned. The second the door cracked open, I pushed through. And there they were. Ryan, standing there in nothing but his boxers, his face going pale the second he saw me. And Emma, my wife, half-wrapped in a cheap hotel bedsheet, frozen in place like a deer in headlights. There's something about seeing the truth up close that changes a man. You think you're prepared for it, that all the evidence you've gathered has made you numb to the reality. But it hits different when it's right in front of you. The smell of sweat and cheap perfume. The rumpled sheets. The half-empty bottle of wine on the nightstand, 2 glasses beside it. Emma's lips parted, but no words came out. Maybe she thought she could still talk her way out of it. Maybe she was about to tell me some ridiculous lie. I didn't give her the chance. I didn't yell. Didn't throw punches. I just pulled out my phone, turned the screen to them, and hit play. The video played loud in the silence. The footage of them outside the bar, tangled together, laughing like I was some clueless fool who'd never find out. The pictures of their cars parked together at the same hotels. The bank transactions, the receipts. Everything. Ryan looked away first. Weak. Pathetic. Emma? She just stared at me, her face draining of color. She knew. She knew there was nothing left to say. I pocketed my phone, exhaled slowly, and looked between the two of them. Hope it was worth it, I said. Then I turned and walked out. I wasn't done. Not even close. Because now that I had my proof, it was time to make them pay. I walked out of that hotel room without a word, without a backward glance, and without a single ounce of hesitation. But make no mistake, this wasn't over. Walking away wasn't surrender. It was strategy. See, men like me don't throw fits. We don't punch walls, don't beg for explanations that won't change a thing. We analyze. We adapt. We counterattack. And Emma? She had no idea what was coming for her. As I drove home, my mind worked like a case file, breaking everything down piece by piece. A confrontation in a hotel room was nothing. It was an opening scene, a preview of destruction yet to come. I had more than just evidence of an affair, I had power. And I was going to use it in the most precise, calculated way possible. The goal wasn't just to leave her. That was too simple, too merciful. No, the goal was to make sure that when I walked away for good, she wouldn't just lose me, she'd lose everything. Emma's whole life was built around her career. The badge wasn't just a job to her, it was her identity, her pride. The thing she held over others, the thing she used to justify every mistake, every selfish decision. She wore that uniform like armor, convinced that as long as she had it, she was untouchable. That's where I'd strike first. It started with the department. I knew every policy, every code of conduct, every unwritten rule. And I knew that relationships between officers, especially when one was married, weren't just frowned upon. They were ammunition. But I wasn't going to report her. No, that would be too obvious, too easy for her to fight. Instead, I made sure the rumor spread in the most organic, uncontrollable way possible. A few casual conversations with the right people. A passing mention to a sergeant known for his loose lips. A strategically placed question about Carter's off-duty activities to a superior who already didn't like him. Within days, whispers turned into stories. The department eats gossip like vultures over a fresh meal, and I had just thrown them the best dish they'd had in months. Then came the financial hit. Our accounts were still joined, her mistake, not mine. I didn't clear them out. That would have been too dramatic, too obvious. Instead, I did something smarter. I rerouted my direct deposits. Froze the joint savings under the pretense of financial security measures. Shifted my investments into private holdings. I didn't take her money, I just made sure she couldn't touch mine. And just like that, the lifestyle she had been so comfortable living with me started slipping through her fingers. Next was the psychological strike. I didn't leave immediately. No, I stayed. Calm. Normal. Watching. She was expecting rage, arguments, maybe even a desperate plea to fix things. Instead, I gave her silence. I came home at odd hours. Took unexpected calls in the other room. Left without saying where I was going. Let her feel that uncertainty, that slow-burning paranoia of knowing something was wrong but not being able to prove it. She started asking questions. Are we okay? Is something wrong? I just smiled. Let her sit in the discomfort. Let her wonder when the real fallout was coming. And then, when she was at her weakest, when the pressure at work was mounting, when the tension at home was suffocating, when the financial cracks were showing, I delivered the final blow. I waited until she had an important evaluation coming up, a career-changing opportunity that she had been working toward for months. And on the morning of her review, I left the divorce papers on the kitchen table, right beside her badge. No note. No confrontation. Just a simple, undeniable message. You are no longer my problem. I didn't stick around to see her reaction. Didn't need to. Because by the time she processed what was happening, by the time she realized just how deep I had buried her, I was already gone. And she? She was left standing in the wreckage, watching as the life she thought she controlled collapsed around her. The execution had to be flawless. No emotion, no hesitation, no wasted effort. Just a cold, calculated takedown that left her with no escape. Emma had built her life on control over her image, over her career, over the people around her. She believed she was untouchable, that she could do what she wanted and walk away without consequences. That was her greatest weakness, and I was going to use it against her. Everything was already in motion. The whispers had spread through the department like wildfire, twisting through locker room conversations and quiet exchanges in the break room. By now, her name was on everyone's lips, her integrity quietly dissected over coffee cups and paperwork. It wasn't an official accusation, not yet, but it was enough. Enough to make her feel the shift. Enough to turn the once respectful nods into sideways glances, the camaraderie into suspicion. But I wasn't done. I needed a final strike. The moment she wouldn't recover from. I knew exactly when and where it would happen. The precinct held monthly evaluation meetings, performance reviews for officers aiming for promotions, commendations, leadership positions. Emma had been working toward a major career move for over a year, angling for a supervisory role that would cement her reputation in the department. That review meeting? It was her shot. The one she had been preparing for, sacrificing for. The one she had built her career around. And I was going to burn it to the ground. The night before, I made sure she felt nothing unusual. No confrontation, no final warnings. Just a normal, silent evening in the same house she had betrayed me in. She barely spoke, her nerves starting to show. She knew something was wrong but couldn't pinpoint it. That was the beauty of it. I had let her twist in uncertainty for weeks, and now she was unraveling. The next morning, she left early, crisp uniform, forced confidence, trying to shake off whatever unease had been clawing at her since the hotel. She had no idea I had already beaten her there. I sat in the back of the room as the evaluations began. Senior officers, lieutenants, department heads, everyone who mattered was present. Emma was called up, standing tall, ready to recite her carefully rehearsed lines about integrity, leadership, teamwork. She barely got through her introduction when I made my move. I stood up. Before this review continues, I have something to submit for consideration. The room went silent. I stepped forward, placing a neatly organized file onto the review board's table. Inside? Everything. The photographs, the hotel bookings, the financial records, text messages between her and Ryan Carter that I had retrieved from backups, detailing not just their relationship, but complaints about the department, about superiors, about cases she had mishandled to cover her own mistakes. Evidence of reckless behavior, misconduct, abuse of authority. A career-destroying dossier, wrapped up in an unshakable bow of cold, hard proof. The commanding officer flipped through the pages, his expression darkening with each turn. The silence stretched. Emma's face drained of color. For the first time, she looked truly afraid. "Sergeant Mark, what exactly are we looking at here?" the captain asked, though he already knew the answer. I folded my arms, meeting Emma's panicked gaze. "The personal and professional record of an officer who has failed every standard this department stands for," I said evenly. "An officer who is unfit to lead, unfit to serve. Someone who represents a liability to this batch. No yelling, no anger, just fact. Unshakable, unforgivable." Emma opened her mouth, but there was no argument that could save her. No explanation that could undo what I had just placed in front of the department's highest-ranking officials. The review ended right then and there. Emma wasn't getting a promotion. She was getting an internal investigation. And as she stood there, frozen, the weight of her choices finally crashing down on her, I walked out. She had taken everything that mattered to me, so I took everything that mattered to her. Emma's face was frozen in horror, her body locked in place as the weight of my final move crashed down on her. The room, filled with senior officers and high-ranking officials, was silent. Not out of respect. Out of the sheer, suffocating tension of witnessing a career, a reputation, and a carefully constructed image shatter in real time. She swallowed hard, her hands gripping the edge of the table as if it could somehow anchor her back to the reality she once controlled. But she wasn't in control anymore. "Sir, this isn't what it looks like," she finally stammered, her voice shaky but desperate to regain composure. "There's been a misunderstanding." The captain slowly turned the pages of the file I had dropped on the table. Photos, receipts, texts. He didn't even look at her when he spoke. "Is that so, Officer Green?" His voice was flat, emotionless. She hesitated, realizing there was no clean way out. Her eyes darted toward me, searching for something: sympathy, hesitation, maybe even the anger she expected but never got. But I wasn't angry. I was just watching, observing, exactly like I had been since the moment I saw the truth for what it was. She turned back to the captain, trying to salvage what was left. "This is a personal matter. My husband and I." "Sergeant," I corrected calmly, cutting her off mid-sentence. "Not husband. Not anymore." She flinched, the words hitting harder than she expected. But I wasn't done. "You're right about one thing," I continued, voice steady. "This was a personal matter. Until you decided to bring it into this department. Until you compromised the integrity of your position. Until you let your personal choices interfere with your duty. You think this is just about us? This is about trust, accountability, and you just proved you don't deserve either." Her breathing quickened. Panic was setting in. She turned to the review board, eyes wide. "Please, just let me explain." "Explain what?" The captain finally looked up. "How you lied to your husband, your colleagues, your superiors. How you used department resources to cover your tracks." He tapped a particular document in the file. "Because from where I'm sitting, this isn't just about a relationship, officer. This is about conduct unbecoming. This is about ethics violations." He let that sink in before adding, "And this is about to become an official investigation." Emma's mouth opened, then closed. No words came out. Her face had lost all color now, and for the first time, she looked small, trapped. And then came the final blow. "As of this moment," the captain continued, his tone final, "you are suspended pending an internal review. Badge and firearm, now." Her breath hitched. This was it. The thing she never saw coming. The thing she thought she was too careful, too smart to ever face. "Sir, please," she whispered. The captain didn't repeat himself. He just held out his hand. Slowly, almost robotically, Emma reached for her badge, unclipping it from her belt. Her fingers shook as she set it on the table, The metallic emblem that once meant everything to her looking so much smaller now. Then her firearm, placed beside it with trembling hands. The final piece of her authority stripped away in a single, devastating moment. The room was silent as she stood there, exposed, vulnerable. I leaned in slightly, just enough for only her to hear. "You always loved control," I murmured. "How does it feel to lose it?" Her eyes snapped to mine, filled with something between anger and sheer, unfiltered despair. But she couldn't say anything, because there was nothing left to say. I straightened, turned, and walked out. And just like that, the woman who thought she had power over everything watched her entire world collapse, while I never even looked back. After I walked out of that room, I didn't look back. There was no need. The damage was already done. The moment Emma placed her badge on that table, she lost everything that mattered to her. And the best part? She did it to herself. I simply let her arrogance, her sense of invincibility, be her downfall. Her suspension wasn't just a temporary setback, it was the beginning of the end. The department moved quickly, launching a formal investigation into her conduct. The relationship itself wasn't the main issue, it was everything around it. The misuse of resources, the dishonesty, the fact that she was involved with another officer while handling sensitive cases. The department couldn't afford that kind of liability. It wasn't long before the whispers in the precinct turned into something much worse. She tried to fight it, of course. Tried to play the victim. Told anyone who would listen that I was just a bitter ex trying to ruin her career. But the problem with that? I didn't have to ruin her career. She had already done that on her own. The evidence was there, undeniable, unshakable. Every lie she told had already been exposed. Every cover story she created had already fallen apart. And Ryan Carter? He didn't exactly stand by her. When things got bad, he did what any coward would do, he distanced himself. Played the "I didn't know she was still married" card, claimed he never meant to get involved in something that would jeopardize the integrity of the force. In other words, he threw her under the bus the second it became clear that his own position was at risk. Emma was alone. Her so-called friends in the department? They weren't about to stick their necks out for someone who had just become a liability. Her reputation, once built on confidence and authority, was now a punchline. Officers she once worked beside avoided her. People whispered when she passed by. The respect she took for granted? Gone. The official decision came down within weeks. She was formally dismissed from the force, not just a suspension, not just a demotion. Fired. And just like that, the badge she had built her entire identity around was gone. But the collapse didn't stop there. Without her job, the financial strain hit fast. She wasn't prepared for that. She had relied on our joint stability, our shared life. But I had taken my name off every account that mattered, secured my assets, left her with only the bills she had accumulated on her own. The mortgage? No longer my problem. The car payments? On her. The lifestyle she had comfortably maintained while sneaking around behind my back? Completely unsustainable now. She tried to reach out. First with anger, then desperation. Calls, texts, attempts to run into me in places she thought I'd be. I ignored all of them. She wasn't my concern anymore. The final blow came when she realized she had nothing left. No job, no money, no respect, no backup plan. She had bet everything on her ability to control the situation, and now she was standing in the wreckage, realizing just how wrong she had been. And me? I walked away clean. Stronger. Smarter. I had exposed her, outmaneuvered her, taken back control in a way she never saw coming. She thought she could play me. She never realized she was the one being played all along. Looking back, I don't regret a single move I made. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't let her twist the truth or manipulate the situation. I let the facts speak for themselves, let her own actions be the noose that tightened around her neck. In the end, I didn't have to destroy her. She had already done that herself. All I did was make sure the world saw it for what it was. Now, she's nothing more than a cautionary tale, a fallen officer with a tarnished reputation, a woman who lost everything because she thought she could have it all without consequences. I sometimes wonder what she tells people now, if she spins some story about how I was the villain, how she was the real victim. Maybe she tells herself that if I had just let it go, things wouldn't have turned out this way. That if I had been weaker, if I had just walked away quietly, she would still have her career, her security, her future. But that's the thing about betrayal. Once you cross that line, there's no going back. No undoing it. No erasing the damage. I moved on. I rebuilt my life. Better, stronger, without the weight of her deception hanging over me. She, on the other hand, has to live with the aftermath of her choices. And every time she looks in the mirror, every time she has to explain why she's no longer wearing the badge she once flaunted so proudly, she'll know exactly why. People like Emma think they're untouchable. They believe they can lie, cheat, manipulate, and walk away without paying the price. But the truth always comes out. And when it does, it doesn't just hurt, it takes everything. So let me ask you this. If you were in my position, if you had the chance to make sure justice was served, would you have done the same? Or would you have let them get away with it? Let me know, because I know exactly what I'd do. And I'd do it again.